I found out I was left out of my mom's will in a room full of people. My siblings were sitting right there, waiting, expecting everything. And when the lawyer finished reading it, they got exactly that. The house, the money, all of it. And me? Nothing. Not even mentioned. Like I didn't exist. No explanation. No reason. Just silence. I sat there, trying to understand how that was possible. Until the lawyer said one more thing. There is one item left. For you. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. My name on it. And the moment I opened it, everything I thought I knew changed. Growing up, I never thought I was the outsider. Not in an obvious way. We were a normal family, at least, that's how it looked from the outside. My mom was always in control of everything: finances, decisions, plans. She liked things organized, predictable. And my siblings fit into that world perfectly. They followed her expectations. Stayed close. Agreed with her. I didn't. Not because I was trying to be difficult. I just wanted my own life. My own choices. And for the most part, I thought she understood that. We weren't distant. We talked. We laughed. But there was always something slightly off. Like I was on the outside of certain conversations. Important ones. She would discuss plans with my brother and sister. But I'd hear about them later. Or not at all. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. I was independent. I didn't need to be involved in everything. And honestly, I took pride in that. Being the one who handled things on my own. Who didn't rely on anyone. Especially not financially. My siblings were different. They leaned on her. For advice. For support. Sometimes for money. And she gave it to them. Freely. I never asked. Never expected anything. Which is why, sitting in that room, hearing that while being read, felt so confusing. Because I didn't expect more than them. I just didn't expect to be nothing. Not mentioned. Not included. Not even explained. And the more I thought about it, the more those small moments from the past started to feel different. Less like distance. And more like something intentional. Something I didn't fully understand yet. But I was about to. The lawyer closed the folder like it was just another routine reading. Like nothing unusual had happened. But for me, everything had. I was still sitting there, trying to process what I had just heard. My siblings shifted in their seats, subtle, but noticeable. My sister leaned back slightly, a quiet satisfaction in her expression. My brother avoided looking at me altogether. No one spoke. No one questioned it. Not even a simple, "Are you okay?" That silence said more than anything else. Because it didn't feel like a surprise to them. It felt expected. Like they already knew how this was going to end. And I was the only one left out of that truth. "There has to be something missing," I said finally. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. The lawyer looked at me calmly. "There is nothing missing," he replied. "Your mother was very clear." Very clear. Those words hit harder than anything else. Because that meant this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was a decision. She chose this. She chose to leave me out. Completely. I turned to my siblings again, searching for something. Anything that didn't feel so final. But they didn't react. No guilt. No shock. Just quiet acceptance. And in that moment, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what it meant. Because being left out like that, it felt like I had been erased. Like my place in this family had been decided a long time ago. And I just didn't know it. That's when the lawyer spoke again. "There is one more item." The room shifted instantly. My siblings straightened, attention snapping back. "Your mother left something specifically addressed to you." I looked up slowly. Confused. Because that didn't make sense. He reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. Sealed. Simple. But unmistakable. My name was written across the front, in her handwriting. The room went quiet again. But this time, it felt different. My sister leaned forward slightly. My brother finally looked at me. Because whatever this was, they didn't know about it. And suddenly, for the first time since the will was read, I wasn't the only one in the dark. I reached for the envelope slowly, my fingers brushing against the paper. And even before I opened it, I could feel it. This wasn't just something extra. This was something she kept separate. Something she chose not to share with anyone else. And whatever was inside was about to explain everything, or change it completely. I held the envelope in my hands, but I didn't open it. Not right away. Because the moment I did, whatever was inside would become real. Final. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I could feel everyone watching me now. Waiting. Because this changed things. Mom hadn't just left me out. She had left me something separate. Something none of them knew about. I turned the envelope over slowly. My name was written across the front in her handwriting. Careful. Familiar. The same way she used to write notes, reminders, little messages. And for a second, it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt intentional. Like this wasn't rejection. It was a choice. I glanced up. My sister was leaning forward slightly, trying to see. My brother was staring now, no longer avoiding eye contact. Because whatever was inside, it mattered. Not just to me. To all of us. And they didn't have control over it. That was new. I ran my thumb along the edge of the seal. Paused. Because once I opened it, there was no going back to confusion. No pretending I didn't know. This was the answer. Or at least, part of it. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about why. Why I was left out. Why she chose them, and not me. Or maybe, why she chose something different for me. That thought hit differently. Because it meant this wasn't simple. Not unfair in the way I first felt. Something deeper. Something planned. I looked down at the envelope one last time. My grip tightening slightly. Then I broke the seal. Slowly. Carefully. And as I pulled the paper out, I realized something. Whatever was inside this envelope was the truth she never said out loud. And now, I was finally about to hear it. The paper inside was folded neatly, like it had been placed there with intention. Not rushed. Not careless. Deliberate. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers steady, but my chest tight. And the moment I saw her handwriting, everything else in the room disappeared. If you're reading this, I stopped breathing for a second. Because it felt like she was right there. Talking to me. Not through a lawyer. Not through a document. Directly. I know this is going to hurt you. My grip tightened on the paper. Because she knew. She knew exactly what this would feel like. And she did it anyway. I kept reading. I didn't leave you out because I loved you less. I swallowed hard. Because that was the first question I had. The first doubt that hit me. And she answered it, immediately. I did it because I trusted you more. That line didn't make sense at first. It just sat there. Heavy. Unclear. I looked up for a second, then back down at the letter. Reading slower now. Your siblings have always needed me in ways you never did. The room felt quieter. Smaller. They rely on support. On guidance. On stability. And I gave them that. I felt something shift inside me. Because that part was true. I had always handled things on my own. Never asked for help. Never depended on her the way they did. But I never thought that would be the reason. To be left out. You were different, she wrote. Stronger in ways I didn't always say out loud. My chest tightened again. Because now, this wasn't rejection. It was recognition. Just not in the way I expected. I picked up the second paper from the envelope. A document. Official. Stamped. I scanned it quickly, then froze. Because it wasn't just anything. It was ownership. A property. Transferred fully into my name. Something separate from everything else. Something none of them received. I looked up slowly. My siblings were watching me now. Waiting for an explanation I hadn't even processed yet. Their expressions had changed. Confusion. Concern. Because whatever they got, it wasn't this. I looked back down at the letter, my hands steady now. What I left them will help them survive, she wrote. What I left you is meant to last. That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about giving less. It was about giving differently. Separately. Intentionally. I lowered the paper slowly. Because now, the truth wasn't unclear anymore. It was right there. In her words. In her decision. And the hardest part wasn't accepting what she did. It was realizing what it actually meant. I wasn't forgotten. I was chosen. Just not in the way anyone in that room expected. I read the last line again, slower this time. What I left you is meant to last. The words felt different now. Heavier. Clearer. Because everything that didn't make sense before finally did. I lowered the letter slightly, my eyes moving from the page to the room around me. Nothing had changed. Same people. Same space. But everything felt different. Because a few minutes ago, I was the one who had nothing. The one left out. The one everyone quietly pitied. And now, that version of the story didn't exist anymore. I looked at my siblings. Really looked at them. At the confusion in their faces. At the way they were trying to understand something they weren't prepared for. Because what they received was exactly what they expected. Shared. Divided. Predictable. But what I received was something else entirely. Private. Separate. Untouchable. And suddenly, the balance had shifted. Not in a loud way. Not in a dramatic, obvious way. But in something deeper. Something final. Because this wasn't just about money. It wasn't about who got more or less. It was about intention. About what she believed each of us needed. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. She didn't see me as someone who needed to be taken care of. She saw me as someone who could stand alone. Someone who didn't need the same things. And instead of treating me like the others, she made a different choice. A separate one. I folded the letter carefully, holding it for a moment longer. Because now, there was no confusion left. No anger. Just understanding. And maybe a little bit of something else. Respect. Because even though it didn't look like it at first, she hadn't left me out. She had set me apart. And that difference changed everything. I folded the letter slowly, holding it a second longer than I needed to. Not because I was confused anymore, but because I finally understood. I slipped it back into the envelope and stood up. The room was still quiet. My siblings were watching me, waiting for a reaction. An argument. A complaint. Something. But I didn't give them that. Because there was nothing left to argue about. What felt like rejection was never that. It just looked that way. I looked at them for a moment, then back at the envelope in my hand. Because this wasn't about comparison anymore. It wasn't about who got more. It was about what was meant for me. And what wasn't. I took a slow breath and let it out. Because for the first time since walking into that room, I didn't feel left out. I didn't feel overlooked. I felt clear. Like something that never made sense before, finally did. I turned toward the door, the envelope still in my hand. Not as something I was given, but as something that was always meant for me. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't come the way you expect it. And sometimes, being left out is actually being set apart.